Peter also had the advantage of seeing in the dark. For him, it was as if the cave was lit up, so he had no problem deciding on the quickest path to take. When he found her, he heard Logan shouting, "Pio!" When Peter turned around, he could see Logan holding his hand out. But there was a round and strange bright green light getting larger with every second on his hand. It was Logan's hand blaster, and Peter had seen what it could do before when it was fired against Fex. Someone stronger than both, him and Quinn. Perhaps even his regeneration abilities wouldn't be able to keep up with this. "You stop running, will you?" Logan complained while looking at Sia. While the blaster was held against Peter, he decided to let the thing go. He wasn't stupid and could always find a way to get Sia later. "What are you doing down here?" Peter asked. At this point, Sia was unsure of what to do. The entrance to another tunnel wasn't too far away, but it seemed like Logan was able to control Peter just like Quinn. She still didn't understand how Peter managed to catch up to her so fast, so her only option was to stay by Logan's side. She scuttled along until she was behind Logan. Logan then tapped something on the side of his suit, which brightened up the area around him with green lights. The pieces on Logan's equipment were illuminating a small 5-meter radius around them. "I adjusted the scanner the school gave us to increase its radius. I had to power it with my beast crystals. I don't get any points for doing that, but to me it was well worth it," said Logan. "That's when I discovered that there seemed to be a strange tunnel underground, but they didn't quite look natural, so I decided to investigate. I never thought anyone else would be down here, so it was a nice surprise to see you." "Do you know the way out?" Sia asked. Realizing from what Logan said, he should have a wide area mapped out using his scanner. "No," Logan replied. Although this was a lie. He knew they would ask to lead him out of here, but Logan had discovered something on his scanner that he had to check out before leaving. Somewhere inside the large cave, Fex and Quinn had decided to walk down one of the tunnels. While inside the tunnel, the connection between Peter seemed to be lost. It had happened ever since he went underground. Quinn thought that it might have something to do with the distance between the two at the moment, as he didn't know that Peter and the others were underground as well. Thinking that help would never arrive, they decided to just leave it up to fate and pick the tunnel with the biggest entrance. As they walked down the tunnel, they noticed that the walls were surrounded by thin blue crystals that gave off a slight glow to them. Not enough to light up the whole area, but one could follow the small light source quite easily. "What are these?" Quinn asked, looking at the small crystals. They resemble something similar to beast crystals, but Quinn thought the only way to obtain beast crystals was by beast. "I don't know," Fex replied. "I was going to ask you the same thing." But curiosity had gotten the better of him, and Quinn decided to place his hand on top of the crystal. At first, he was planning to use his inspection skill, but there was no need, since the system had automatically given him a message. "Basic tier crystal. Would you like to store it in your system?" The shock from the message was quite immense. At school, they had been taught that the beast crystals could only be obtained from beasts. This was why the human race had been sending hunting parties to slay the beasts, even though there was a chance of death. Some crystals could be used to create powerful weapons, even more powerful than their modern equipment. But right here, crystals were hanging freely on the wall around him, and it wasn't just one crystal. There seemed to be hundreds of crystals through the tunnel they had just walked. If Quinn was to think about all the other tunnels as well, there would be at least 1,000 down here. With Fex keeping an eye over his back, Quinn was unable to store it in his system. However, he did pull the crystal out and placed it in his trouser pocket for later. "It might be something important," Quinn said. Fex just shrugged his shoulders, uninterested in the small crystal, and carried on walking ahead. Finally, they reached the end of the tunnel. After exiting the tunnel, the small discovery Quinn had made was nothing compared to this. The two boys froze for a moment once they exited the tunnel. Looking at what lay in front of their eyes, they paused for a moment. Somehow it didn't feel like they were underground. "Hey, can you see what I'm seeing right now, man?" Fex asked. "If you're talking about those buildings right in front of us, then of course I can," Quinn replied. Exiting the tunnel, it seemed like they'd arrived at what looked like a type of town. They couldn't measure how large the entire place was. Buildings stretched out far and wide, and it was comparably as large as any one of the shelters they've seen before. If they were to give a rough estimate, it looked like a few thousand people could live in such an establishment. The ceiling seemed to be unreachable. Although they could see the peak, it felt like there was no way to reach it. Their gaze moved on towards the tallest building that stood in the center of the place. It was a round, tower-like structure that was tall and high, but it hardly touched the ceiling. If one wished to even touch the ceiling, they would have to build a similar-sized building and place it on top of the already existing tower. Although a town underneath a mountain was surprising to them, it didn't seem impossible. There were rumors of such shelters being built on other planets where the temperatures could reach extreme levels at different times of the year. Underground shelters were the only answer to such uninhabitable places. And so the reason why both of them were shocked was for a different reason entirely. The two of them could already observe that the design and materials used to create the buildings were different. One of the main features was the solid black material it was made from. Instead of brick, cement, or metal, it was a different kind, a special black substance that was more stable and stronger as the primary material of all the buildings. The substance was said to be just as strong as galthrium. Although the place looked abandoned and was void of people, the buildings were a different matter. The structures looked perfectly fine and hadn't deteriorated a single bit. The only semblance of the passage of time of abandonment was a layer of dust or rock-like substance from the ceiling that coated the top of everything. And finally, the design. Although the substance was strong, it wasn't as flexible and nimble as galthrium. This meant that the edges weren't smoothed out, giving a slight rocky look. After looking at the buildings, both of them concluded that the structures built in front of them were not made by humans. This was the reason why both of them were in shock. "They're Dalki structures," Quinn muttered. This was a huge discovery. The humans had only built a shelter and classified the place as an orange portal because they thought that they had discovered the planet first. There were rare cases like this when the two opponents were trying to take control of a planet at the same time. If the two groups were to meet, regardless if there was a treaty signed or not, a fight would break out until one side was annihilated. As Fex heard these words come out of Quinn's mouth, though, there was confusion on his face. What are you on about?" Fex replied. "These aren't Dalki structures. They're vampire structures." Hearing these words equally shocked Quinn. He was almost positive these were Dalki structures. He had seen them in his lessons and on the news time and time again. "The boy is right," the system replied. "These resemble the structures that were built in my time." The system didn't answer any of the questions Quinn had right now, and only confused him even more. "Fex, have you ever seen Dalki structures?" Quinn asked. There was one possibility, Quinn thought. Perhaps the two structures were similar, and Quinn himself was being confused. Maybe there was something that he couldn't spot.
Hi, Quinn here. Wondering what happens next? If you want to jump the queue and unleash all episodes, click on the link here and install the Pocket FM app.